Hi, everyone. My name is Amy Benziger. I am an executive in residence at Cue Ball Capital, and I'm so happy to be here moderating the panel this morning, looking at new approaches to venture capital. So by way of background, my role at Cue Ball, I am looking at female-focused ventures. So trying to take a bit of a different approach to not only looking at female founders, which has been such an important and wonderful point of conversation, but also saying that there's a massive opportunity to look at females as the end consumer. So and how we fill the kind of gaps in that market. So I'm excited to be here with today's panelists who are all shaking up the venture capital industry in their own unique ways. And I'll kick off with a few brief intros and then a couple deep dive questions. We only have about 40 minutes and we have a lot of great perspectives here. So I will try to hold a few moments for questions at the end. So on the end, we have Ajit Singh, who is an MD and partner at Artemin Ventures. Previously, he spent time on the corporate, academic, and startup side, logging over 20 years at Siemens, launching a cancer diagnostic startup, and serving as both a professor at Princeton in neuroscience and teaching at the Stanford School of Medicine. He's also a lifelong lover of books and writes book reviews for outlets such as the New York Times and Huffington Post in what I'm sure is a very small amount of spare time. And then we have Conwell Reiki, who's an MD at Inventus Capital Partners. Conwell has the great honor of being the first Indo-American founder and CEO to list a venture-backed company on the NASDAQ and taking his company Excellin public in 1987. He's gone on to co-found the Indus Entrepreneurs, a network to provide support to Indian Americans hoping to start a business. And then we have Sang Ding, who's on the consumer investing team at Comcast Ventures, looking at a range of direct-to-consumer products, marketplaces, apps, and emerging tech frontiers. With a background coming from Yahoo Corporate Development and Morgan Stanley, she brings a valuable perspective on the corporate side that we're going to dive into. And then we have Varvara Raskova, who's a venture partner at GVA Capital. Previously, she co-founded a medical device startup and has served as a member, advisor, and mentor to a range of startups. She's currently raising a micro fund of her own as a group of younger VCs interested in a new era of co-investment and collaboration, which we'll talk about on today's panel. And lastly, we have Rama Gupta, who's a managing director at Nexus Venture Partners. Ram has been a figurehead in Silicon Valley, beginning his career by taking WebMD public from a startup to a public company valued at $2 billion. He went on to play leading roles at PeopleSoft and Cast Iron Systems, seeing both through to acquisition. Ram has had an incredibly successful career as an independent investor with 8 companies acquired and 2 reaching an IPO prior to joining Nexus. So let's dive in. Ajit, I'd love to start with you. We're going to kick off today's conversation by looking at your somewhat unconventional approach to venture capital in that you are looking to find the next billion-dollar industry by recruiting promising young individuals right out of university. So before they've even launched a company. And taking that one step further, you've talked about broadening your focus outside of Silicon Valley. I'd love to hear your thoughts on why you incorporate academia into your investment approach and what's come out of it.
Thanks. A few things come to mind in response to your question. So I'll sort of walk through them and try and integrate the answer at the end. Number one, there's sort of 2 axes along which we can pick people. On one axis is youth and creativity, and the other axis is gray hair and experience and wisdom. And I believe, in my biased perspective, I'd rather pick people with youth and creativity, and I can supplement whatever gray hair or wisdom that's required. It doesn't quite show underneath my turban, but there is. So that's one reason. Second reason is to create an ecosystem. So I draw an analogy with the islands of Galapagos very often. Anybody's traveled to Galapagos? Enjoyed a vacation there? It's a list, it's an item you got to put on your bucket list. It's the ultimate platform of innovation of nature. So nature creates more life in Galapagos than anywhere else on the planet. New species are born, old die off, and it happens because of sort of perfect temperature, the ocean currents coming from multiple directions, good mixing of life by the coral reefs underneath, and then new life is created, genetically passed on, and the old life passes on. There are very few equivalents of that nature's platform of innovation in the sort of person-made or man and woman-made platform of innovation. Silicon Valley is one example. There are very few such examples. And at the core of this ecosystem lies a university. Actually, you got to go and see where is the seed from where this life in the ecosystem begins. And that's invariably in the person-made platform, it's always the university. So you've got to go attract the best talent, the best ideas from there. The third point you made was why go after these sort of non-mainstream? I mean, everybody, all VCs are mining MIT and Stanford and Caltech and UCSF. But there's some great work taking place at University of Wisconsin in biotech. There's some great work taking place in University of Minnesota in magnetism. There's phenomenal work taking place in Austin in ag tech. And if you're interested in these white space, unconventional investments, these ideas are equally valid. There's some great work coming out of there. And perhaps the last point is if you look at the male to female gender ratio in any university, any college level, the ratio is almost 50-50, almost always. You take that to grad school, the ratio becomes 70-30, maybe 75-25. You take that to workplace, even in Silicon Valley, the ratio is 70-30. You bring it to leadership, the ratio goes 85-15. You bring it to entrepreneurship, the ratio is 90-10. You take it to VC, the answer is 95-5. So clearly, something that began at 50-50 became 95-5. So something went wrong in that transition. Where are we going to fix it? Back to the root. So those are the few thoughts that come to mind in response to this question. And if you sort of integrate it all, that sort of explains why I'm so keen on mining and sort of harnessing the strength in academia to build our portfolio of companies.
I love that. Thank you. Ram.
Ajit, this was just wonderful. I wanted to add one quick thought. I think it is our responsibilities as leaders in the Valley to fix this, and leaders in the industry. And just to give you my example, if I was taken for a surgery and I had a choice between a white American doctor, surgeon, and a black African woman, for sure, I guarantee I would go for black African woman, because they must have gone 4 times their adversity to be at the same place. They must be 4 times as good.
Beautiful.
To be in that place. And my first boss was a woman, very proud to be that. My second boss was a woman, even more proud to be of that. And every time in my life, all things being equal, if I have a choice to hire a woman CEO or executive, I go for that. And I don't know if you saw, just last week, I hired Linda Crawford to be CEO of one of our startup called HelpShift, and very proud to have her on board. So it's our job. I think we just got to take it seriously.
Absolutely. I mean, tongue in cheek, your first boss was a woman, second boss was a woman. I suppose one of them was your wife, or no? Okay.
I'll be third.
Okay.
I actually have a friend who hires, within the first 5 hires of his company, he's done multiple startups, he always hires a stay-at-home mom, because he says those women do not waste any time and they do not suffer any fools, which I think is amazing.
Great point.
And Varvara, I'd actually love to bring your voice into this conversation. As I mentioned, you said you're raising a micro fund and you're part of a group of young VCs who enjoy really collaborating and co-investing. That bucks the traditional stereotype of people hiding deals or wanting to make sure that they get far enough ahead before they bring anyone in. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on a new generation of venture capitalists.
Sure, I'm happy to expand on that one. It's pretty exciting to be part of that. I remember when I decided I want to become a VC, and I told it to my uncle, who was an investment banker. He was like, "Oh, don't go there; they'll screw you over. You love people too much." I really love people too much, and I guess young VCs do too. And I recently started explaining what do I do in a bigger sense. Why? Why do I do that? I see investment as I believe in people. In a broader sense, in a deeper sense, I believe in them with money, with support, with advice, with mentorship, with everything I have so that I can empower them. And that resonates with young VCs, young people like me that are not knowledgeable of old rules and are inventing their rules they want to play with. We're in it for the long run. And in the long run, you can't really screw and win. In that sense, we decide that the only way is from like the place of believing in people and helping them and collaborating with each other, helping each other. And those networks, they make us stronger. We know with whom we want to co-invest. We know that it will take us years, if this company is successful, to work all together. And with that, we want to have right people with us. So our young VC group is a group of people who fundraise their own microfunds and hopefully, probably will fundraise bigger funds after our successes, because it's not one person winning, it's a group of people supporting each other and winning. And that's what we do by sharing deals that we truly believe will be amazing, by providing our advice on different aspects of the same startup, by discussing those startups. So it's essentially like 30 VCs that are discussing one deal and bringing different perspective on the table and thinking, okay, this founder, my thought on this founder is that one, and my thought on the market is that one, and how do we make it all work? So it's pretty exciting to see how it evolves. It's amazing because we can empower a founder that gets into our network, not only with one fund, but have more funds support them, more people chip in and provide all their advice network, all their connections everywhere, be that US, be that international company. It's like we become best friends and we're in it for the whole long ride together.
Awesome. I think that a lot of this is about the power of networks, and we were just talking, Conwell and Ajit, saying that Conwell is responsible for Ajit leaving Siemens and starting his own career in the startup universe. So Conwell, I'd love to hear your thoughts. You've been called the godfather in Silicon Valley, and someone who has definitely built a network yourself, the Indus Entrepreneurs Network. And I would love to hear you talk a bit about what you've seen out of the power of that network, and also how you've seen the face of Silicon Valley literally changing from the white male in sweatshirts to a much more diverse vision.
So I'll tell you a couple of stories to make a point. In 1967, when I arrived in the US, a professor on the very first day told me, you're from India, your education is probably subpar, and you're probably not going to keep up with the students here. So he offered to help me. He said, anytime you need help, please call me. And he picked up a phone. This is a telephone, and he showed me how to dial the telephone and gave me his number. A month into his class, I aced his shotgun quiz. He gave a shotgun quiz, and I aced it. So he calls me to his office and says, nobody was supposed to ace it. And I want to remind you, we don't cheat in America. I said, I wasn't cheating. This was an easy quiz. The next shotgun quiz, he stood behind me for a whole hour. And I aced it again. He said, if you're cheating, you're very good at it. See, that was the image of Indians in 60s in the US. Helpless, hopeless people. And we had to fight that through trials. So in 1981, when I was doing my startup, we saw every VC in the Valley. And we heard over and over, damn good idea, but you don't have a businessman in your team. Indians by that time, had a reputation of being tatties. 3 Indians, and afterward you heard, there's no white male in the team. How can this be a successful team? And subtext was no white man will ever work for Indians. Salespeople, marketing people, finance people, they're all white professionals. But eventually one VC looks at it and says, 3 Indians with a business plan. Yes, sir. He said, damn good business plan. Yes, sir. He says, But Indians had not been funded yet, ever. They haven't been entrepreneurs. Ooh. And he says, why not? Maybe it's time to try one. So that was the logic used by John Bosch. Maybe it's time to try one. And he says, I don't want any sass from you guys. I'll make you one offer, and you have 15 minutes to decide. And he said, I'll give you $2 million for half the company. And we didn't need 15 minutes. We said, yes, sir, we'll take it. That was a very fair offer. And that's how the Indians started break in the Valley. One VC says, it's time to try one. And of course, John Bosch made over 100 times his money. when we went public and all that. And he lived to tell the story about, he discovered Indians in the valley. So it's, Indians are now everywhere. They are VCs, they are entrepreneurs, they are seen as a, as a very good entrepreneurs and VCs. But that wasn't always the case. And we had to fight, claw our way to the top. And so let's move forward to 1991. By that time, there were 4 of us who had, taken companies public. And so there was, presidents now, but it was still very, very hard for people to get funded. Very, very, Indians were still getting same rejections in 91 that I felt in 82. So we launched this group called TIE, the Indus entrepreneurs, to help each other. And he said, we will mentor, and if push come to shove, we'll fund some of these entrepreneurs. And that launched the whole Indian wave. And by 95, I think most of these things were behind us. By several people by 95 had come out. So I think this is the thing where you have to take matters in your own hand. Nobody from outside will help you. Maybe there's going to be an exceptional guy who will try one, right? But you have to fight your way to the top. When I hear that somebody else is not giving me a chance, I start to say, nobody is supposed to give you a chance. It's your to do grab it, go for it, and you need to form your own groups. And I think I have funded over 100 companies in the last 20 plus years, and we have had 4 million entrepreneurs. And so 90 to 10 is not holding in my case, it's 96 to 4, and I don't think I have bias against women. I haven't just seen women coming after with plans, and so I don't know what is missing here, but we need to have some more energy. Go for it. And there are people like me who will fund it. But I haven't seen the plans.
So we've talked about the power of the network of Indus entrepreneurs in the valley itself. But Ram, you have a fund that invests both in the U.S. and India. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what's the benefit of having a fund that actually has a foot in both countries, and how have you seen that accelerate singular countries?
I want to make one point before.
Sure.
The idea of Indus entrepreneurs was not to favor Indians to become entrepreneurs. And the idea of Indus entrepreneurs was to encourage Indians to become entrepreneurs. And the idea was to have a large number of these people should not try, so the successful emerge. Within the network, we were not soft on people at all. We were not soft on people at all. Our attitude was, hey, you are entitled to try, you are entitled to have the mentorship, but you still have to succeed and compete on your own out there. And so, the whole the TIE network was to inspire a large number of people to try, give them this idea that they are worth, they're as good as anybody else out there. So it wasn't that we will make Indians entrepreneurs. We knew they were entrepreneurial people, they were smart people. We just need to inspire them to go for it.
Well, it worked. Look at Ajit.
I'm just going to take 30 seconds to supplement this. Networking is a very organic process, so I'm now being prescriptive. Don't go to a networking event or even to go have a lunch with someone with an agenda in mind. Just go. So there's a Hindi phrase, and I'll translate it. It says, "Baaton baaton mein se baat nikalti hai." Like, you start a conversation and something comes out of it. Opportunities find you and you find opportunities. These things are extremely organic, extremely spontaneous. The more agenda-free you are, the more the likelihood that something very interesting will happen. And when that happens, be very willing to trade a plan for an opportunity. I mean, opportunity doesn't come because you have a plan. It comes because it's opportunity. It's opportunistic. Should be no embarrassment in being opportunistic when an opportunity strikes. Don't complain about the noise.
I forgot the question.
I would love to hear your thoughts on having access to investors, partner, and capital in multiple countries, how you believe that accelerates singular companies.
Great. So if you drill a hole from Palo Alto through the earth, where do you think it'll come out?
Wherever your home was.
It'll come out in Bangalore. And so India and US are two countries which are similar in many ways and as far apart as many ways as one can imagine. And Nexus is a very unique fund that a lot of investment firms are in India and are in US, but they're different in the sense that the Indian partners have different agenda, different fund, different cycles. This is a fund that is truly one fund, two countries. The team is the same, the investment is the same. And what we're looking at for companies is a global perspective. It is the marriage of Indian ingenuity and American creativity. You put them together and magic happens. And so our lens to look at things is that, hey, is some technology being created in India, and we have deep relationships and partnerships in India and in US, how we can inculcate and bring that to US and make the market available. Or vice versa, for example, in healthcare and ed tech, there's technology being created in America, but the huge market, a couple of billion people soon, I hope not, but could happen, would be living in India. And the market for healthcare and education is diverse and significantly larger than it's ever going to be in US, in India, for example. So we look at companies that have potential of technology innovation making to US, and we have been very successful. Just to name a few companies, H2O.ai, probably the finest name known in the AI industry, was incubated in India and now is here. Postman, a lot of you might have heard of it, is 4 million developers use that tool today that started in Bangalore and now based in San Francisco. Dhruva, another technology that started in Pune and is now making its presence felt in the valley. So this collaboration of Indian ingenuity, American creativity, a lens that says technology that transcends countries and technology that transcends, or ideas that transcends America to a global stage where you have to play differently and bring the network of people, technologists, innovators, partners, investment to these people has been just a fabulous, fabulous journey for us. Thank you.
I would love to add, as an entrepreneur initially from Russia, this international perspectives, like living in different countries even, adds a lot to your superpowers here. You don't think in this box that exists in your head, like it's the only way, the way that we are used to here. So we love funding international startups as well. We look at companies all over, Russia, Europe, Israel, Canada. It's actually probably gives them more power to persevere as well, just like you mentioned about women. They have to struggle so much more to prove themselves. They're not out of Stanford, they're not out of Berkeley, or they don't have those like check marks, out of the boxes. And because of that perspective and perseverance, there are many times they're so much stronger in the long run. So I believe we have to use this power of perspective. And even if you're an American entrepreneur, if you live somewhere, if you travel enough, your view of the world changes and your view of your company changes. You see different opportunities than whatever you see on your home market. And this is amazing, and that brings a lot of value.
It's interesting. My third job, I used to run a company in Moscow.
My hometown.
Yes, and learned incredible skill sets being in Moscow, almost living there, running a business there, learned things that there was no other way that would have happened.
Two comments to support the point that's been made about international outreach. There are many industries where this going global makes perfect sense. If I take an example from healthcare, in the United States, a company goes through sort of 5 broad milestones. You have a great idea, you get funded, you prove the science, then you get regulatory approval, and then you get reimbursement approval. 2 extra steps compared to a tech company before you can be commercially successful. Now, let's go up to regulatory approval, which takes a lot of time and money. Then you have to end up spending easily 2 to 3 years waiting for reimbursement approval in the US. there is one half of this world which is self-pay healthcare. So clearly, one should not take regulatory risk because you want to be sure that you have a stamp and that you can hold yourself to a moral standard that, yes, this is a test I'm willing to give my child. This is a drug. That's the ultimate test, moral test. Are you willing to give this healthcare, drug, diagnostic, whatever, to one of your children? So if you've crossed the threshold, there's no point waiting here to get commercial success. There's elsewhere you can go with it. My second point, having worked in a international company, large MNC, Siemens, for 20 years, that was one big lesson in the advantage of having global exposure. So while we in the Valley love to think, startup is the do-all and end-all, I do encourage, do not be, so shy from working for a large company. I know it's a pain. I know the bureaucracy gets in the way. My daughter, Pavita, is sitting here. She had an experience with a company before she started her own. And there are annoyances that come from having a boss. But that problem never goes away. You always have a boss of some sort or the other. Having that international exposure gives you tremendous bit of advantage in just having an alternate viewpoint, the ability to be challenged by a different way of thinking, having a different language to think in. Those are all advantages that you'll never get by just starting your life in a startup. So it's perfectly okay putting up with the bit of inconvenience for a few years.
I'd love to bring in Song's perspective here. As a member of the Comcast team, you have both a venture team as well as a massive corporate media engine behind you. And so what are your thoughts around how you can put that engine to work in a similar way as Ajit was mentioning, you can put your corporate background to work within the startup field?
Yeah, it's a really interesting time right now in corporate VC. A lot of different companies have now set up corporate venture arms in the Valley. You can see everyone from JetBlue to Pizza Hut. So it's a really interesting time in the corporate VC world. And so one of the things I would call out is there's very many different setups. So ranging more or less strategic, more or less financial. And maybe it's helpful if I kind of clarify how Comcast Ventures approaches venture investing. So our approach is that we're a fund that makes independent financial investments in promising and exciting early stage startups. And after investment is when we go to leverage our strategic platform, whether that's Comcast, NBC, or Universal. And I think the power of this financial investor plus strategic opportunity is best highlighted by examples. So I am a consumer investor first and foremost, and one of the things that we like to do to help our direct-to-consumer portfolio is help them scale beyond digital advertising like your Facebooks or Instagrams to traditional media outlets like television. So if you're someone like Away Luggage, one of our fast-growing portfolio companies, you've done very well on the traditional social media and digital acquisition channels, but you're ready to kind of maybe expand your funnel and start testing things like television. And for a young startup, that's something that's kind of daunting. It can be, to your point, very tedious and difficult to navigate the world of TV paid media. But with our help, it's one of the things that you can quickly get access to and at cheaper prices and at more accessibility. And then on the frontier tech side, so I also spend time in our emerging tech portfolio. So one area where there's been a lot of really exciting opportunities in the virtual reality and augmented reality space. So we have a really robust portfolio there, and you can kind of let your imagination really wander when you think about all the capabilities that can come with working with someone who physically owns theme parks. And there's a lot of really exciting things that we've been doing with our VR portfolio across our theme parks, our movie studios, as well as the NBC digital platforms. And then lastly, the area that I personally am spending a lot of time in now and I'm really excited about is the future of autonomous mobility and transportation. And I kind of get this pushback a lot, which is like, you're Comcast. Why in the world would you be looking at self-driving cars or autonomous AI? And one of the really interesting things is that Comcast actually has the third largest fleet of vehicles in the United States. So we've got over 40,000 of those trucks that you see driving up and down the roads, coming to your house to fix cable, and you start thinking about the impact that increased efficiency, autonomy, or better even fleet management and fleet operations can have, and it's pretty significant. So in summary, I would say when you're corporate, the intention should be to first and foremost support the entrepreneurs and support the startups that you're working with and investing in. And after you make an investment and understand the business plan and the roadmap of the companies, that's when you can start pulling in the various assets and resources you have across your platform, and that's kind of where I think the corporate venture capital model works best.
I'll pull a plug for her. Comcast Ventures is fabulous to work with. We work with them all the time.
That's great. And I think it's interesting that, in the context of the panel, we talked about how the Way of the Valley is helping startups skip innovation challenges, when actually what we're talking about is really, we're not innovating on old things, we're discovering things that are entirely new. You're looking at autonomous self-driving vehicles, which you wouldn't have ever thought would be a thing 10 years ago, and Ajit, I'd love to hear your perspective, because you talk a lot about white space investments and the idea of creating billion-dollar industries. So again, not innovating on something new, but really spending a fair amount of time in the diligence process to make one or two bets that you think is going to build an industry rather than disrupt. So maybe we'll hear a bit on your perspective on that, and then I'm sure everyone on the panel has things to add in.
So, I mean, even though we try and tout white space investments very much because it's a cool word and everything, but if you think about it, it's really taking venture to what it once was 30 years ago. We're really not doing anything new per se. This is what early stage venture investors in the 60s and 70s did. But since it's done less and less, we obviously take pride in it for doing it. It's best illustrated with an example. So we have a venture-backed construction company. So a company that builds buildings for you. Sounds very anachronous. I mean, how about an industry which is viewed as very non-innovative, a typical education level is high school or less, a general contractor comes and pretty much does R&D on your job site. And this company is founded by an entrepreneur who's not from the construction industry. He came from chip design industry. He was at Intel and one of the lead architects on the Pentium chip, and before that, the 486 and 386. And his epiphany was, if I take a chip, a memory chip, and simply physically magnify it 9, 10 orders of magnitude, it looks like a building. It actually behaves like a building. So the constraints that you use in optimizing real estate on silicon, how many cells can I pack in a given amount of silicon? How many rooms and hallways can I pack in a given amount of land and make it very efficient? This thing should run PowerPoint, 10 people simultaneously and not fail. This thing should have 100 people in the emergency room and continue to operate. So he said, how about I take the tools I bought from Cadence once when I was at Intel and use the techniques I learned, optimizing, simulating, and designing a building with it. Now, okay, I have a good design. How do I build it? Do I hand it off the same GC who's going to come and mess up my site? So he asked himself, what's an industry that builds large structures very efficiently? And his answer came from shipbuilding. You can build a 500,000 square foot cruise ship, 8 stories high with 1,000 rooms and 10 restaurants and swimming pools and all that in about 5 months on water. And it takes us 5 years to build a hospital on land. So a chip builder and a shipbuilder, his co-founder, went out to disrupt the construction industry. Now think of it's the second largest industry globally, $8 trillion with a T. So even if you get 1/10 of 1%, it's still $8+ billion company, okay? So to bring innovation from an industry that has proven something and bring it to another industry which has not seen innovation in 20, 30, 40, 50 years. In this case, the last patent granted in construction was the use of a crane in 1967. That's how archaic it was. So it gives you a very unique opportunity to build an industry de novo. I mean, there's really not much to disrupt. It's such a fragmented industry. Yes, in some sense you're disrupting, but you have to build it de novo. That's an example, and there's quite a few more. There's a lot of heavy lifting. This thing is not a 3-year turnaround. It takes perseverance for 10 odd years to go change something that hasn't changed in 100 years, but it's well worth the effort.
Ram, I'd actually love to hear your perspective. We talked a little bit about being the first to see an industry in a different way. You were the first multiple times seeing industries in different ways, looking at the first internet application software, the first application integration for the cloud. Do you have any predictions for firsts or things that you're seeing that you're excited about?
Sure. I think what I'm very excited about right now is that things make sense in a time when things come together. I remember in 1994, part of my team created the first MPEG chip, first video decoding, first internet video streaming, and we threw a party and nobody came. In 94, what were you going to do with it? If some of you probably remember the first iPad came out of Apple, it was called Newton. John Scully had launched it. Nobody bought it. So you get ahead of it, and then things don't work out, and you don't have commercial success. It's a lot of fun doing it, of course. And it was every time I'm watching my video at home now with Roku, I look at that Roku, which is now $50. The initial Roku that was created at Silicon Graphics by a few of us was $15,000 in '94. So the white spaces were there, the white spaces are now. But things have to come together for it to be real. Like now, video is real. So what is real, I think, going forward, I think now we're at the point in time in history, in technology, where the CPU is no longer a limit, the storage no longer a limit, network bandwidth no longer a limit, the algorithms of deep learning no longer a limit. So I believe that right now is the time where data-driven healthcare would change healthcare forever. We are beginning to look at companies that are mind-boggling. They can look at tissue samples and images of MRIs and CAT scan and PET scan and runs through algorithms in real time and can pinpoint a potential tumor with an accuracy of 0.5%, where a radiologist average accuracy is 20%. 0.5 to 20% order of magnitude. So I think we are now at the cusp, after all these years of technology, to finally go from disease management as what I would call Band-Aid. Today, all medicine, sorry, Dr. Ajit, is symptom management. Nobody gets cured of anything. There is surgery, there's antibiotics, there's pain management. You can't even cure a cold. And I think now we're at a cusp where potentially in the next 10, 15 years, you're going to see us, with all the technology that has come together, start to find cure, start to solve healthcare problems. And I'm just fabulously jazzed about that right now. What I get to see and what I get to hang out with people, I think it's time the healthcare goes from diagnostics to curative, and it's possible.
I want to add that I'm excited about this field the most as well. This is my favorite. This is where I'm fundraising the fund, early stage health tech fund that will approach healthcare holistically. And my dream is to actually reinvent healthcare. So we can come from this point where we are now trying to cure something that already happened, but we'll come to preventing precision, personalized healthcare. We will be able to predict everything. And the startups that I see right now, they're mind-boggling. It's amazing how technology can impact our world currently. And I can't imagine like how far we can go in like 3 to 5 years from now. It will be a different world, really. It's so exciting.
A quick addition, we are really excellent at sick care, we are lousy at healthcare. In fact, we hardly do healthcare. Exactly. So you earlier talked about my love for books. There's two wonderful reads. There's a book from the 70s called Social Transformation of American Medicine by Paul Starr. And he talks about how we took 100 years of development in healthcare and turned to sick care. And now we actually have to almost rewind and reverse and take it back. There's a more recent work, Elizabeth Teesberg, from 2006 or 7. It's called Redesigning Healthcare. And apropos your point, Varvara, it goes exactly to the heart of the issue. Let's design it de novo, and you can actually build healthcare. Somehow you have to get the impact of the third-party insurance system out of the way because it's an adverse incentive to redesigning healthcare.
Yeah, it's a fair amount of the work that I'm doing at Q-Ball because you look at all the different ways in which women's healthcare issues have been underfunded and under-researched, and it's fascinating when we start to think about how looking at data aggregation and personalized healthcare will help that.
I would just add a point, we started WebMD in 1996. And that time, we thought we will change healthcare. No, we really wanted to. And I sit here in 2016, last year, and I go, all that I did, or we did, was we created more anxiety. You go to WebMD site, you're going to come out more anxious. You'll think you have some diseases. And so nothing changed, really. Nothing changed. And I feel now is the time with the technologies there, and it's personalized healthcare, it's undoing of the sick care, all the perverse incentive, and a pharmaceutical company comes out with $430,000 drug, it's ridiculous. And that's got to change. And you can travel outside of US. We were in Sweden last year, and my bag got stolen. And the same medicine that you get in America for $1,000, you get there for $100. How is that? Why is that? So those socioeconomic factors will, of course, come in play. But before that, I think the technology will change so dramatically that the socioeconomic factors would have no chance to stand its way. And back to Ajit's point, this is where being in countries like India and South Asian countries and other Asian countries where the deathly hold of pharma and insurance nexus that exists in this country doesn't exist in those countries. There's no payer problem. Everybody pays for their own care. And I think the magic would start happening here, that some of the technology from here would first go take roots in those countries and then come back and almost force itself back into the Western world to start accepting it.
Well, we could move into a panel on personalized healthcare with this group, but I know that we're out of time, and I apologize that we didn't have time for questions, but I think it's a mark of a lot of interesting perspectives and a great conversation that happened. So thank you to all of the panelists. Appreciate it, and we really appreciate your time and your attention today. Thank you.
Well, thank you for organizing it.